But let's start today with a little game of Guess Who. Here's how this goes. I give you some clues and you try to guess who I'm talking about. Today's Guess Who is going to be based on accomplishments. All right, so here we go. This person that I'm thinking of is the author of more than 100 books on politics, mass media, and linguistics. In 2005, he was voted the world's top intellectual. He's been a professor of linguistics and philosophy at MIT for over 50 years. Any guesses? His name is Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky. Sounds a little bit more like a wrestler if you ask me. Anybody have a Chomsky t-shirt or poster on their wall? Probably not. But you know, in some circles, Chomsky's a really, really big deal. And the reason I bring him up is because of something he said that I think has something to do with all of us and is very relevant to our topic today. In an interview on NPR, Chomsky said this. He said, "The goal of the American economy is to turn us all into atomistic units of consumption." Atomistic units of consumption. He says the goal of American corporate culture is to lure us all into believing the meaning of life is found in how much stuff you can consume, how much stuff you can acquire or own. So if our lives are all about getting and having stuff, then we'll do just about anything to have the money we need to get the stuff we want. We'll work long hours, we'll move across the country, we'll sacrifice just about anything for a raise or advancement. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want to be an atomistic unit of consumption. It just doesn't sound good. I'll tell you what, if you're watching this with somebody, turn to them and say, "Hello, atomistic unit of consumption." All right, we're wrapping up our series today called Be Rich. And each week in this series, we've been answering the question, what does it really mean to be rich? And for the last 3 weeks, we've been told we are rich. Now, I don't know about you, I still don't feel rich. Now, I know that compared to the vast majority of people in the world, if I have a place to live, food on the table, a car, a computer, I'm really well off. I am rich, whether I feel like it or not. And the reason we've been talking about how we are rich, even though we don't feel like it, is because of these words in a letter from the Apostle Paul to his apprentice Timothy. He wrote this. I'm going to read them to you. He said, "Command those who are rich in the present world," okay, which would be us, "to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share." Now, through the Apostle Paul here, see, God is talking to people who have more than most. And on a global scale, that's us. Okay, so 2 weeks ago, we talked about how being rich in good deeds is what we need to be about. Last week, we talked about being rich in generosity. And today, we want to look at the final phrase there where it says, being willing to share. Now, when I first saw that, I thought, okay, it already says to be rich in good deeds and rich in generosity, so why mention sharing? I mean, isn't sharing a good deed? Isn't sharing a way of being generous? I mean, why point out sharing? Well, see, I think it's because being someone who shares with others is a very different thing from being a person who does a lot of good deeds or is generous. See, I think it's possible to be rich in good deeds and rich in generosity and yet not be rich in sharing. Melinda Gates, wife of multi-billionaire Bill Gates, she heads up the Gates Foundation, which has given away more money than anybody else in history. She's been called the most generous person in the history of the world. She and her husband are certainly rich in good deeds, certainly rich in generosity. But see, I'm saying it's still one thing to give stuff away. It's another thing altogether to be a person who shares what you have. Because see, sharing is about so much more than being generous. I'll tell you what, think about when you were first taught about sharing. I mean, for most of us, it was like around the age of 3 or 4. Mom and Dad would make us share, right? They'd say, now you share with your brother. And so we would begrudgingly, let our brother or whoever have one of our Twinkies or Ding Dongs, or let our friend have another turn on our Xbox or our PlayStation, whatever it might be. I'll never forget one of the biggest fights Dave, my brother, and I ever had as kids. It was a time when my mom and dad left us home alone and told us to share a pan full of beef for sandwiches. I don't know what happened, but by the time I got to the beef, there was barely any beef left. And I don't know what got into me, but I was raging mad. I mean, all I remember was like slinging this near empty pan of beef across the kitchen at Dave's head. Of course I have anger issues. But see, we can be generous, I think, from a distance. Write a check, send a gift. Sharing requires relationship, proximity. Sharing can get messy. When Lisa and our family moved to the city, we decided to try and get by with one car. And we were doing okay until the kids' activities and her work started to kind of pick up. And so we started shopping for another car. And we weren't going to spend a whole lot of money, but I was kind of starting to get into the whole notion of a new car. Well, one night we were talking to our small group about it when one of the young ladies in the group approaches me and she says, hey, John, I've got a car at my parents' house. It's sitting in the garage. I never use it. I'd love to share it with you. If I ever need to use it, I'll just borrow it from you. Now I got to be honest with you, okay? I had two thoughts, all right? One was, wow, that is incredibly nice of her. But that thought was immediately followed by and overlapped by this thought. I wonder what kind of car it is. Why? Because I wanted something nice and shiny and new. Yes, I am an atomistic unit of consumption. Turns out she had a 1999 Ford Taurus. Probably not my first choice. Yes, I am incredibly ungrateful. I realize that. But I gotta tell you, 18 months later, it really has. It's been a huge blessing. Saved us a good chunk of money, and it's actually been kind of fun sharing the car with her. See, to be rich in sharing means we get beyond being atomistic units of consumption, to being people who share our homes, share our stuff, share our lives. And see, that's hard to do because sharing requires relationship. It requires proximity. It requires trust. You see, you got to be rich in community to be rich in sharing. Now, before I show you what that looks like, let me show you what it doesn't look like.
Is your small group a too much information extravaganza? A touchy-feely share-a-thon? A mind-numbing theological marathon? Mine was. That's why I created the world's first openly shallow small group. Here's how. Do you guys believe the promises of God are real?
Yes, in my own life.
I'm sorry, sorry, it's my bad. Let me rephrase that. Yes or no? Does anyone believe the promises of God are real? You must be ever vigilant. Nothing kills a shallow small group quicker than people opening up and sharing their feelings. Asking questions that foster discussion, that's a big no-no. True or false? You had a good day today. So on a scale of 1 to 2, A, Jesus, B, Jesus and the devil, with 2 being strongly agree and 1 being strongly disagree. So if the whale is traveling at 10 miles an hour and it spews Jonah at 7 miles an hour, does anyone know the capital of North Dakota? Anyone? Somebody give me an adverb. If heartfelt and genuine conversation rears its ugly head, hey, buddy. Well, it's time to move quickly to rid your small group of it.
So that's how I interpret it. I'm no theologian or anything, but...
No, you're not.
Well, I had this verse that's been on my heart.
Really, on your heart? Like just sitting there on your left ventricle?
I really just wanted to share that...
Fire drill, people! Small group fire drill! Find your exits now! Let's go! Even at prayer time, you can't let your guard down. So, does anyone have a brief, generic prayer request they can cover in, say, 20 seconds?
My coworker's mother,
Too specific.
someone I know, has been diagnosed
Bogging down. Bogging down.
This person is really
When I
scared.
said brief, I wasn't talking about my underwear.
People sick.
Oh, that's good. Anybody want to say a prayer for sick people? No one? I'll do it. Amen. All right, let's go eat. Be strong, shallow small group leader. If people push you to go deeper, just remind them, crazy people don't go off the shallow end. No, they go off the deep end. Shallow small group. Because when things get too deep, people drown. Won't you join us?
Okay, so now let me share with you the most incredible picture I know of anywhere of a group of people who are rich in sharing. And we find it in a history book called Acts of the Apostles. And it reads like this. All the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. They sold their properties and possessions and shared the money with those in need. They worshiped together at the temple each day, and in homes they met for the Lord's Supper and shared their meals with great joy and generosity. Did you see that? The word shared is there 3 times in 3 verses. These people knew how to share. Those who had plenty shared with those who didn't. And I'm guessing that, everyone sort of took turns being on the giving and the receiving end of the sharing. And what was their attitude towards sharing? It says they shared with great joy. See, sharing is a huge deal to God. And now I'm sure most of us would say we're in favor of sharing. I mean, we tell our kids to share all the time, right? But how many of us really practice it? I mean, really practice it. I don't mean just loaning a weed whacker to a neighbor if theirs breaks down. I'm talking about regularly sharing, pretty much anything and everything. I'll tell you what, scale of 1 to 10. How rich are you in sharing? All right? If 10 is being rich in sharing and 1 is being poor in sharing, where do you rank yourself? Not do you think it's a good idea, but do you live a life that could be characterized as rich in sharing? Scale of 1 to 10, where would you put yourself? All right, now, if you're on the lower end of the scale, why? Why? I mean, what keeps us from sharing more? Is it success? I mean, do we, sort of subconsciously think, hey, I worked hard for what I have. I earned it. And besides that, by sharing, aren't I, kind of enabling? Or how about the barrier of individualism? Have you ever thought, hey, I'm fine on my own. I don't really need anybody else's stuff. I mean, if you want to borrow something I have, go ahead. That's cool. But me, I'm all good. Or how about busyness? I mean, who hasn't thought, boy, I don't have time to share life and be in community. I'm doing all I can just to keep up right now. Maybe when things slow down. Or I don't know, maybe it's a fear of being burned or burned again. You might say, hey, I did the whole community sharing thing one time and I was taken advantage of. I'm not doing it again. You know what? I think I struggle with every one of those barriers. Now, after that description of how the early Christ followers shared, there's more. And it goes on to say this. It says they shared like they did, okay? And then if you follow the next phrase, it says they shared like they did, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of the people. And each day the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. 3 great outcomes from the rich sharing that took place in this group. 3. First, okay, God is glorified. That means God is getting all sorts of credit, honor, and praise because of what was happening in and among these people as they shared. All right, second thing, they were enjoying each other. I mean, they are experiencing real, genuine community. And third, they're changing the world. I mean, they are changing the world. Every day, people are finding their way back to God. And it's not because they have the best music or deeper teaching or a tall, dark, and handsome campus pastor like, Sean Williams. No, well, maybe the dark and handsome part. No, they're changing the world because they're living in a community that was rich in sharing. They were a community that could look each other in the eye and say, there's nothing this life will bring your way that we can't get you through. And you know what? People couldn't wait to be a part of it. Now, before you say, well, that was just a different culture. That's just what they did back then. Well, no, that's not what they did back then. Historian Rodney Stark writes this about this countercultural movement. He says this. He says, Christianity revitalized life in these Greco-Roman cities. And then he goes on to say this. To cities filled with the homeless and impoverished, Christianity offered charity as well as hope. To cities filled with newcomers and strangers, Christianity offered an immediate basis for attachments. To cities filled with orphans and widows, Christianity offered a new and expanded sense of family. To cities torn by violence and ethnic strife, Christianity offered a new basis for social solidarity. In the 4th century, the Roman Emperor Julian tried to launch pagan charities to compete with these new Christian communities. All right, and in frustration, the emperor wrote this. He said, these Christ followers support not only their poor, but ours as well. Everyone can see our people lack aid from us. I mean, check out the simple act of sharing everything they had in the name of Jesus was changing their world and posed a threat to the Roman Empire. Now, if you've been around community for any amount of time at all, you know I can't talk about being rich in sharing and rich in community without talking about small groups. We call them small groups, but what happens in these groups is far from small. So if you're not in a group, then I got to start there. Try one. Try one. I know we have one that would work for you. And you know what? These groups are full of people who had all sorts of reasons for how they could never find a way to share their time, their resources, their burdens, their joys with other people. But you know what? They finally did, and they will tell you it is a game changer. And for those of you who are in a small group, all right, before you get too comfortable, let me just say this. We all know it's possible to be in a group and not really be sharing. You might just be showing up and not really living in community. I mean, if the only thing you're sharing with your group is the snack schedule, you're not rich in community. And I'm not minimizing the importance of the snack schedule. Rich sharing has got to start with someone. It's got to start with someone. So think about it, okay? I mean, what would it take for you? What would it take for you to begin to set the new standard in your group and start sharing more of yourself with the people in your group? And here's another thought. If you're in a group, share your group with others. There are far too many people who have yet to experience what so many of us have experienced in our groups. As a matter of fact, just a few weeks ago, somebody in my small group told me, don't ever stop inviting people. And this was one of those people, I mean, we invited over and over and over again. I thought they were never, ever going to show up. They finally came. I thought they were never going to get there. And they were the first ones to tell me, don't ever stop inviting. I know there's a tendency sometimes to think that, well, if we include new people, it'll somehow diminish the depth of sharing. Well, remember those early Christ followers? They experienced a tight-knit community while God was adding to their numbers daily. See, including people in community, it doesn't kill it. It actually makes the community stronger. A while back, a friend of mine was in a group where something occurred that really opened my eyes to the power of sharing and living in community. This particular group was made up of couples in their early 30s, with the exception of one couple who was in their 60s. And at the end of their gatherings, the group would break out into two smaller groups, men in one group, women in another, and they would pray together in those smaller groups. Well, one evening, the husband from this older couple told the men how he really wanted to buy a Christmas gift for his daughter, who he'd become estranged from, but that his life insurance premium was also due, and he couldn't afford to cover both. So he asked the guys to pray for him about this difficult choice he had to make. Insurance premium, life insurance premium, or gift for his estranged daughter. I mean, he was in a real quandary because he wanted to reconcile with his daughter, but he was seriously considering sacrificing his life insurance in order to do it. Well, after the group that night, the guys in the group got together and decided to pitch in to cover the cost of his life insurance premium. I mean, it wasn't a lot of money for them, but to the older man, it was a significant part of his income. Well, the following week, the younger men gave him enough money so he wouldn't have to sacrifice his life insurance. And when they handed him the cash, they said the man just looked at the ground, began to shake a little bit, and actually started to cry. He said he'd never received anything like this before and felt so blessed that a bunch of guys half his age were willing to share with him in such a profound way. 2 months later, while he was working, he died of a massive heart attack. The man's wife asked the group to plan and lead their memorial service. In that letter to Timothy that I mentioned earlier, the Apostle Paul wrote that an age is coming where all the money in the world won't matter. Whoever dies with the most toys still dies. No one can take it with them. Now, there's a great book titled When the Game is Over, It All Goes Back in the Box. It's by John Ortberg. When the game is over, it all goes back in the box. And life is like that. We simply can't take it with us. There are no scenarios where we take what we make to the next life. As Chomsky would say, we can keep living as atomistic units of consumption, or we can have a life that is life the way God intended, rich in community, rich in generosity, rich in sharing. So here's the final takeaway for today, okay? It's in two parts. All right, you ready? First one is this. Find a group where you can start living out this shared life we've been talking about. All right, put your reasons for not giving it a try aside and just give it a shot. All right, so if you're in a group, that's really good. All right, but you're not off the hook. This next takeaway is for everybody. This week, before next weekend, I want everyone to pick one way to be rich in sharing. One way to be rich in sharing. And it might be that you need to do this sharing with somebody in your group if you're in a group. All right, pick one way that you can be rich in sharing. All right, here's some ideas. Share a meal. I mean, have a meal with someone. Schedule a lunch or a dinner or a breakfast. Share your stuff. I mean, what is something you have that you could share with somebody? Or how about this? Share some time. I mean, just find some way to connect with somebody you need to connect with. Maybe it's a friend or a family member, a neighbor, whoever it might be. Share an idea or a dream with somebody, or share a struggle or a doubt. Or how about this? Share some money. I mean, just share some money with somebody, or do it anonymously. There's probably somebody you know that could use a gift card or some cash to help make ends meet, or to do something special they've wanted to do for a long time. See, you want life that is truly life. Bill and Melinda Gates, LeBron James, Oprah, and anybody else who has all kinds of money and you will all have the same bank account in the next life. See, the life that's truly life is not about getting the most toys or the most stuff. It's about being rich in good deeds, being generous, and being willing to share. Jesus wants that life for you. And that's why he did the ultimate good deed, gave the most generous gift he could, and shared the greatest burden ever when he came and gave his life and then overcame death so that you and I could be connected to him and the best community ever, forever. And this stuff isn't just something that happened. It's something that's happening. And it's our turn to share. Because Acts 2 can happen to me, and Acts 2 can happen to you.